Welcome Internet to Psychoanalytic Talk, and today we're going to be talking about one of the very first concepts of psychoanalysis, and one that has been there, part of the building blocks of the whole discipline, and perhaps even of the whole psychological endeavor, free association. So what is free association? Well, free association is both a rule and a technique in psychoanalysis. It's a rule because it's often said at the very start of an analysis with an analysand by the therapist that fundamentally he or she has to come and talk about what is in his or her mind. That they have to be able to speak about everything that comes through their minds, as bizarre, strange, sexual, provocative, destructive as it may seem. They have to be able to share it with the therapist in order to understand certain types of behaviors. Because free association and the fact of talking about what comes to your mind might seem very random, at least on the face of it, but it isn't. Because what happens is that once you start associating freely, you start to realize that what is happening in the now and in your mind, in the right now, is based upon experiences, thoughts, feelings, memories that have their roots within the past. But that past is not like explicit, like you can't always like pinpoint what comes from where and how did that develop. But with free association, what happens is that the mind itself brings up those pieces like a bit of a puzzle, and it allows for both patient and therapist to be able to build a meaning on behavior that could not be otherwise understood. One of the paramount examples of this is, of course, the dreams, because as we all know, dreams don't have an explicit meaning, or rarely have an explicit meaning. Often they're very kind of abstract, or they seem very arbitrary. But with free association, the dream becomes like a language, like the stone rosette, which you have to decipher. And free association is that stone, in the fact that it is a way of interpreting the dream, giving it meaning, where perhaps if you were of a different school of psychology, you would say there is no meaning, or the meaning is who cares, really? Well, we care because we think that meaning gives us access to something so deep and profound that we don't have the whole picture, and that free association helps us having a whole picture of the phenomena. And that's something that I find very interesting, as Freud used it primarily for dream interpretation, but I feel that it can be used in a whole different range of cases. For example, I often use it with patients that have a hard time talking about themselves or understanding what happened. And often how I present it is like, let's try something, let's try an exercise, a little something. Could you tell me the first thing that comes into your mind, as bizarre, strange, awkward, or irrelevant it seems? And often, the fact of asking that, the patient is like, if he doesn't know, or she doesn't know anything about psychoanalysis, might be kind of like, what? Okay, I'll try. And what I have seen in my clinical experience is that when you do so, something very interesting happens. I have never had the case when you use free association as explicitly as I do, that nothing happens. A little something happens, and that little something is incredibly interesting, as it shows a true light onto something. And it's incredible. And sometimes even as a therapist, you're very surprised because you're like, well, I don't think it might open up anything. And it opens up an immense plethora of other issues that you were not aware of, and the patient was not necessarily aware of. And the fact of freely associating creates something in which the patient can recognize that within there might be a surface level, a conscious level of phenomena that is supported or raised by hundreds of different layers, and that through free association we can delve, or at least dive into those layers and make something out of it, which I think is the most important aspect of free association, is that it allows us to, in a way, reach into the psyche, to have an exploration of phenomena in also, I think, a very fun way. And when I mean fun here, I don't mean it in any sense but the real sense of the word. That it's both exciting because you're discovering something new, and interesting because it's often something that comes out of left field. And yet, there is something that connects, and often patients realize that so many things are connected. In a way, it allows us to, because we have a split in our minds between consciousness, pre-consciousness, and unconsciousness. Well, at the moment of free association, at least that's how I conceive of it, the connectiveness of the free topics occur, the free instances occur, and for a split second, something becomes conscious, and it becomes tolerable because there's the relationship with the therapist, that the patient is in this with the therapist. And I think that's wonderful. It opens up so many possibilities. Of course, there might be a lot of criticism of like, well, that's just wrong. I mean, you can't, it's unlogical to just like ask people to say what comes into their mind, because it's always going to be some level of arbitrary, and what makes you think that there's something deeper? Well, I would just answer that by saying, regardless of what happens, I have never, not once, in my clinical experience, found that brings something dull, boring, or wrong. There's always some truth to it. When I mean truth, I mean subjective truth, obviously. I don't mean like concrete realness. I mean something that's really intimate and personal. And sometimes you get people that are able to interpret their own history through free association. That free association was like the key to a lock. And once you've unlocked, you can open the door. And that's exactly the best part of it, is that opening of the door. And that opening of the door, be it, how can I say, true or not, doesn't really matter, at least not in psychoanalysis, as our goal is the exploration of subjectivity, of all the idiosyncratic manners in which humans can experience their lives. As simple as that, or as complicated as that. But the free association is a path to the unconscious mind. And I think it's one of the best paths. And that's, I think, something that's very important. So in my case, I use it as an active technique, right? I ask my patients to do it. If they're not able, if their mind is not trained to do it, I ask them to, because I think that helps the process if the clinician verbalizes it. But some analysts just say it at the very beginning of therapy, and they help patients through the fact of not talking or talking very little during therapy, so that the patient can project and free association can flow. So that's not my way of doing it, but some people do it like that, and that's fine. And there's also a very interesting point that is raised by Thomas Ogden in his book on reverie and interpretation. He says that what is very important, and what he does personally in his clinical practice, is that he says that you can say everything you want, but you don't have to say everything. And that's a very important nuance. As for him, the psyche still needs some form of intimacy, both for the patient and from the clinician. So in a way, free association, yes, but not as a trial. It's not like you have to put up with everything out there, even if it does violence to you. It's not about that. It's about how you can feel free to share whatever you want to share, and the clinician will always accept it. But it's not you have to. It's not like, it's not a due. The clinician has to work for it and has to be there for it. As the patient sends out something, the clinician has to receive it. But the patient doesn't have to send something to the therapist. And it's a job of both parties to be able to connect and create a therapeutic relationship that's solid, secure, and good enough in order for the patient to be able to talk about his free associations. And of course here you might think that free associations is something that are reserved for the higher end of cognitive function, but I would say no. Even people with intellectual disabilities can do it. Of course, you might have to repeat and explain them why they can do it, but they're very much able to. I've also, in my clinical experience, seen people with schizophrenia being able to do it, and as I've mentioned before, incredibly interesting results, as they can be very, very interesting. Also, one should note that even if there is free association, that doesn't mean you have to interpret everything that is intertwined in the free association. Free association in itself is therapeutic, I feel, as it creates connectiveness within the mind of the patient and of the therapist. In a way, it allows both parties to co-construct something, to co-build together to the point in which an understanding can be reached. And that understanding, when it's built on free association, is kind of great, because you see things you would have never seen if you hadn't used it, or if you hadn't proposed free association in the first place. So it's one of those techniques which is very important, and I feel has to remain to an extent at the crux of psychoanalysis. Not all the time, right? But sometimes, when you're blocked, when you don't know what to say, when you think that you've reached a dead end, well, that dead end might be a hidden door that you can only discover through free association. So that's my take on it, which is one of my favorite concepts of psychoanalysis period. And I hope that you find it interesting, and that it's something that you can use for yourself, because I haven't talked about it, but you can also use it for you. Like, you don't know why something is annoying you, you don't know why. Just think about the first thing that comes to your mind, and then analyze it, and then you might be able to get some insight out of it. Of course, it's not like a one-win situation, or if you feel anxiety, you shouldn't try it necessarily without a therapist. But it can be a good exercise, even for a daily life, to understand some things better. Anyway, that's pretty much my take on the whole phenomena. I hope you found this video interesting. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.